At night, when the world becomes softer, stories return to their original pace. This is one of those stories. Imagine a place that once breathed with rhythm and purpose. A city built not for spectacle, but for continuity. A city that did not announce itself loudly, yet shaped the lives of thousands and quietly influenced the fate of a region. Today, we return to such a place. Its name was Kumbhi. Long before straight borders were drawn across Africa, before maps were folded to fit colonial desks, Kumbhi stood at the heart of an empire. The Ghana Empire, ancient, disciplined, and wealthy, rose not by conquest alone, but by understanding movement, of people, of ideas, of gold, and of time. Kumbhi was not one city in the modern sense. It was two. One quarter housed the king, the court, and the spiritual heart of the empire. The other was home to traders, merchants from the Sahara, scholars, scribes, travelers who followed the slow pulse of camel caravans across the desert. Between the two lay distance, intentional and symbolic. Power and commerce, belief and exchange, coexisting without collapsing into one another. At dawn, the city woke gently. The sun rose over earthen walls shaped by patient hands. Gold dust changed owners quietly, measured with care. Words were spoken in many languages, yet understood through trust built over generations. This was not a city that hurried. It did not need to. Gold flowed through Kumbhi not as excess, but as responsibility. The empire controlled access, not greedily, but strategically. Gold was buried with kings, not displayed. Wealth was something to be guarded, not flaunted. In this restraint, the empire endured. Travelers wrote about it. Arab chroniclers described its order, its justice, its prosperity. They spoke of a king who ruled with ritual and balance, of guards who wore gold, yet stood still, of courts where disputes were settled carefully, not loudly. Kumbhi was known, not as myth, but as reality. And yet, if you search most modern maps today, you will not find it. Time began to thin the city long before colonizers arrived. Trade routes shifted, climate patterns changed, political power moved. The empire weakened, not suddenly, but gradually, like a tide retreating without announcement. By the time European cartographers arrived, Kumbhi was already becoming a whisper. Its ruins lay quiet beneath sand and grass. And so, it was easier to erase than to remember. Maps are not innocent. What they include feels permanent. What they exclude feels unreal. When Kumbhi disappeared from maps, it did not only lose its location, it lost its voice. Generations grew up believing Africa's story began elsewhere, later, under different names. But land remembers, even when paper does not. Beneath the soil of present-day Mauritania, fragments remain. Broken pottery, foundations of walls, the outline of streets once walked by thousands. The earth holds the memory patiently, without protest. At night, when the desert cools, the wind passes over these remains like a hand brushing across an old scar. Nothing speaks aloud, yet nothing is truly silent. The removal of Kumbhi from maps was not an accident. Colonial mapping favored ports over inland capitals, routes of extraction over centers of governance. Cities that did not serve colonial economies were deemed irrelevant. Their absence made room for a new narrative, one where Africa appeared empty, waiting, unfinished. But Kumbhi was finished in the way all living cities are finished, through use, through change, through time. What was lost was not just stone and structure, but memory. The understanding that Africa once organized itself with complexity, restraint, and global awareness. The knowledge that prosperity existed without conquest by Europe. That law, trade, diplomacy, and spiritual order flourished independently. When a city is removed from maps, it does not vanish immediately. It fades, first from classrooms, then from conversations, finally from imagination. And when imagination loses a place, history soon follows. Yet stories resist erasure. They travel differently than maps. They do not require borders or coordinates. They move through voice, through nighttime reflections, through the quiet insistence that something once existed and mattered. Kumbisala mattered. It mattered to the traders who trusted its laws, to the kings who understood that power must be balanced with distance, to the people who lived ordinary lives within its walls, lives of routine, belief, and hope. And it matters now, not because it seeks revival, but because remembering it restores proportion. It reminds us that loss does not always come with fire and noise. Sometimes it arrives softly, disguised as progress, carried by rulers who rename landscapes and redraw lines. Tonight's lesson is simple, but heavy. What we forget does not disappear. It waits. Memory is not only about the past, it is about responsibility. To remember is to resist simplification, to refuse the lie that history belongs only to those who wrote it down last. Some cities fall, some are buried, some are erased. But when we speak their names again, slowly, respectfully, they return, not as ruins, but as teachers. Kumbisala no longer needs to be on a map. It only needs to be remembered. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you have learned a thing or two, kindly share in the comment section. Thank you.